Identity and Critical Theory Perspectives, Economic Inequality. What is the identity and critical theory perspectives? How do they differ in their views on the origin, persistence, and solutions in regards to economic inequality? The identity perspective on globalization shows the importance of a stable, transparent government for development. Also, how policies in the advanced economies, such as agricultural subsidies and trade policies, can impact the development chances for other states and, in this case, promote economic inequality. Critical theorists identify events and people who are unfavorably affected by the political, economic, and social forces of the world economy. Their studies look at those who do not benefit from the overall order of the world and try to understand the origin and cause of this. Origin of economic inequality from the identity perspective, using Latin America as an example. One factor is early decolonization and unstable governments. Military rule and political instability claimed Latin America during the 19th and 20th centuries, seeing dictators such as Alberto Fujimori, who ruled Peru for over a decade. Even today, most Latin American countries are weak democracies. Political instability is without a doubt a major cause of Latin America's disappointing economic performance. Another factor is rent seekers, which are firms that lobby limiting competition and taking a monopoly rent by producing at very low costs and selling at very high costs. This assisted with the origination of economic inequality, with happenings in Brazil and other large Latin American countries by big businesses and even national leaders. Social inequality is yet another factor contributing to its origination. The identity perspective causal arrow suggests that social inequality in Latin America has stemmed from a long history of oppression by European elites, playing a role in their economic inequality compared to other countries worldwide. Now, looking at a critical theorist's view on Latin America and the rise of economic inequality, we see a slightly different motivation for this problem. When the rise of colonialism and imperialistic ideologies began to dominate in Europe and strong national powers began spreading their influence to poor regions around the world, more specifically to the Americas, economic inequality's foundation was laid. Once colonization took place, the powers in control began the process of exploitation and put many other controlling factors on the colonies, making them even more dependent on the metropole nation. Why does economic inequality persist from the identity perspective? Take sub-Saharan Africa as an example. From the identity perspective, SSA has suffered from many things that compound to allow economic inequality to persist: unfavorable geography, colonial rule, and indigenous divisions. African governments impede human development. Lack of incentives to engage in business activities and the inherent marginalization of women prevent true economic equality in the development of the SSA. Why does economic inequality persist from the critical theory perspective? Sub-Saharan Africa, from the critical theory perspective, is still suffering from the long-lasting effects of colonialism and imperialism. This allows for easier exploitation of these regions by Western nations. SSA is impacted by two systems that have been a result of globalization: the dependency theory and the world systems model. Dependency theory holds that in developing regions such as SSA, colonialism and oppression can result in 1. People losing their capacity to feed themselves, and 2. The deterioration of local enterprise ad production activity into the informal sector. The world systems model organizes the world into one of three categories: 1. Core states, leading countries; 2. Peripheral states, less developed countries; or 3. Semi-peripheral states, which are a mix of the two. The impacts of this system are global economy that is stratified and global division of labor that is static and fixed. Ultimately, this is why inequalities will persist. Solutions to economic inequality from the identity perspective, using Asia as an example. From the identity perspective, there are a few solutions to solve the problems with economic equality. Asia has been one of the most successful developing regions since World War II. Domestic political stability helps development, and Asia had domestic political stability in spades. After World War II, a stable one-party government held power for long periods. Democracy spread in Asia as well. Western European countries colonized lots of Asia in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. In Asia, land reforms helped with the equity and development. Asian government intervened domestically in export-led development and created internationally competitive industries. They later created limits on export-led growth such as crony capitalism and microfinancing. The final solution is the motivating Asian values that made Asia so successful. Asian values were Confucian ideas emphasizing authority over individualism that motivated economic success. Solutions to economic inequality using the critical theorist perspective. In regards to Asia, the critical theorists would argue that economic disparities will not simply cease to persist by only emphasizing core Asian values or the development of export-led growth. They center around the idea that relationships have already been historically predetermined in regards to who will remain in power and those who will remain marginalized. The only solution provided is to increase awareness and opposition of the people to the present global system as a whole. Failure to confront the issue in terms of the whole system will lead to variances of the issue in other sectors. Solutions to economic inequality using the critical theorist perspective. In regards to Asia, the critical theorists would argue that economic disparities will not simply cease to persist by only emphasizing core Asian values or the development of export-led growth. They center around the idea that relationships have already been historically predetermined in regards to who will remain in power and those who will remain marginalized. The only solution provided is to increase awareness and opposition of the people to the present global system as a whole. Failure to confront the issue in terms of the whole system will lead to variances of the issue in other sectors. Now you know the difference between the identity and critical theory perspectives and how the identity and critical theory perspectives view the origin, persistence, and solutions to economic inequality.